A judge tried to outsmart a 12-year-old girl, but she shattered the courtroom instead. The courtroom in Toledo, Ohio was colder than necessary, not just from the relentless hum of an overactive air conditioning unit, but from the way eyes glanced at Imani Jefferson, like she was something delicate on display behind a pane of glass. She sat still, hands clasped tightly in her lap, clad in the same faded yellow cardigan she always wore when her nerves whispered too loud. Her foster mother had ironed it the night before, despite Imani's insistence that she didn't need to. But that didn't matter. 12 years old, barely 5 feet tall, eyes the color of rich earth, quiet yet unnervingly focused, far too composed for a child. The gallery wasn't crowded. A few journalists, caseworkers, her foster parents, Deborah and Stan Greer, seated quietly on the left. On the right, a woman in a rigid red blazer, Celeste Boone, gripped a balled-up tissue in one hand and a manila folder in the other. Imani knew her biological aunt. They had met twice, once under the sterile eye of supervision, once at a diner where Celeste spent more time battling the waitress over cold fries than speaking to Imani. Imani didn't want to be here, but she understood exactly why she was. Judge Gerald Norwood, in his 60s, with glasses dangling from his neck, settled into the bench as if the wood had molded to his frame over the years. He peered at Imani like she was a misplaced piece on a game board he'd memorized long ago. "Miss Jefferson," he began, voice gravelly as he shuffled some papers. "I'm aware this is uncommon. Children testifying in custody hearings is not something I entertain lightly." "I understand," Imani responded, her voice firm, unwavering. The judge looked up, caught off guard by her poise. He wasn't the only one. The room had braced for tremors, shaking hands, tears, a child too overwhelmed to speak. But Imani sat there, composed, prepared, as if she'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 different ways. A cough broke the silence. A pen clicked. A phone buzzed, then stopped abruptly. Norwood cleared his throat, softening his tone. "You strike me as rather sharp," he said. "Bet you do well in school." "I manage," she said coolly. "Modest, too," he chuckled, trying to ease the tension. Then with a smile, "Tell me something, just for fun. Ever snuck a cookie before dinner?" Imani tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing in analysis. "That's a leading question, Your Honor. You're implying I have, rather than asking if I did." A muffled laugh escaped from the gallery. Norwood raised his brows. "Well then," he said, "how about this? Let's play a little game. I ask a question, you say truth or lie? Sound fair?" Imani scanned the room once, then nodded. "Only if I get to ask a few, too." The judge smiled again. "Fair enough." But from the very first question, he realized something. This wouldn't be a game at all, because Imani hadn't come to play. She'd come to alter the course of her own life. "All right, Miss Jefferson," Norwood began, lounging back. "Truth or lie, you've stayed up past your bedtime more than once this week." "Truth," she answered without pause. "I was reading the Family Law Journal of Ohio, 2022 edition." Soft laughter flickered through the room again, puzzled and impressed. Norwood squinted. "The Family Law Journal?" "Yes, sir," she said plainly. "It's available online. That's where I learned about the best interest of the child standard." The judge cleared his throat again, sitting up straighter now. "Okay," he said. "How about this? Ever pretended to be sick to skip school?" "Lie," she said. "I haven't missed a day since third grade." That was when Celeste Boone's lawyer, Benjamin Rohr, leaned forward. Slick back hair, thick glasses, and the air of a man used to winning small wars. "Your Honor, perhaps we could return to the relevant matters." But Norwood lifted a hand to silence him. His eyes hadn't moved from Imani. "All right," he said. "Your turn. Go ahead." Imani didn't rush. She thought. chose her words with care. Truth or lie, you've already made up your mind about where I should live. The air in the courtroom seemed to compress. Even Roar sat back. Norwood hesitated, then exhaled slowly. Truth. Imani nodded as if she'd already known. She turned to face Celeste. The woman straightened, visibly unnerved. Truth or lie? Imani asked. You told the caseworker you could provide for me better than the Greers because you make more money. Celeste blinked. True, she answered, cautious now. Then why do 4 of your last 6 electric bills show late payments? Imani asked. A collective hush fell over the room. Celeste's lips parted, then sealed again. From her tote bag, Imani produced a folded document. I got the records from the downtown library. Public access. Roar shot to his feet. Objection. This is completely inappropriate. It's relevant, Norwood said, his voice low but certain. Sit down, Mr. Roar. Imani didn't flinch. Truth or lie, she continued. A child's voice should matter in decisions about their own life. The judge stared at her, deeply and for a long moment. Truth, he said quietly. Imani's fingers finally uncurled in her lap. Then I'd like to speak, she said. Not about cookies, not about games, just the truth. The judge motioned gently. You may. She took her time, not from fear, but from precision. I've lived in 6 homes in 7 years, she began, her tone calm, composed. Some were okay. One had a dog that chewed my socks. One smelled like onions and baby powder. One locked the fridge after 5 p.m. No melodrama, no theatrics, just facts. But the Greers, she looked toward them. They didn't ask what happened to me. They asked what I liked to eat, what books I enjoyed. They didn't treat me like a case file. Deborah wiped her eyes. Stan tightened his grip around her hand beneath the table. Imani turned to Celeste again. You told my caseworker you should have custody because we're blood, but you didn't visit me until the court made you. Celeste shifted in her seat, uncomfortable. I'm not angry, Imani added quickly. I'm just saying, I've had to raise myself for a long time, and I can tell when people show up because they care, and when they show up because they're supposed to. Norwood tapped his pen, but didn't speak. You want to know why I started reading about family law? She asked. He gave a slow nod. Because people kept deciding things about my life without asking me. Adults sitting in rooms like this one, saying things like, she's too young to understand, or she'll adjust. But I do understand. I know what safety looks like. I know what fear feels like. And I know when someone is lying, especially when they're smiling while doing it. Silence. Then more gently now, she added, this isn't just about who wants me. It's about who sees me. She looked again to her foster parents. The Greers know I hum when I read, that I eat pizza backwards, that I collect old bus passes and keep them in a shoebox because somehow it makes the places I've been feel like they mattered. That sentence lingered in the air like music refusing to end. Roar leaned towards Celeste, whispered something. She didn't respond. Then Judge Norwood softly. How old were you when you started reading legal documents? Imani didn't hesitate. 9. I started with eviction notices. Something shifted in his eyes. Not pity, something deeper. Recognition. He took a breath, leaned back. All right, Imani. Thank you. That was very helpful. I'm not finished, she said. He blinked. You're not? No, sir, she replied. I need to correct one of the affidavits. It contains false information. The room rustled again. Which one? Norwood asked. She reached into her bag once more and retrieved a photocopy. This one, filed by Celeste Boone. She claimed to live in a 2-bedroom apartment, but this lease, dated 2 weeks after the affidavit, shows she's in a 1-bedroom unit, meaning she'd have to convert the living room into a bedroom. Celeste's cheeks flushed. That was a typo. It's not just that, Imani interrupted. The lease is dated after the affidavit was filed. I got this from her building manager. Told him I was verifying housing stability for court. I used my school ID. And just like that, the courtroom wasn't in control anymore. She was. The courtroom had fallen silent, not with tension, not with fear, but with reverence. The whispers had evaporated. All eyes were locked in. They weren't just watching Imani, they were bearing witness. And still, she wasn't done. She hadn't yet finished unraveling the carefully constructed web of half-truths. She was only just beginning. A hush settled over the room, not uncomfortable but sacred, like everyone present had just remembered to breathe after holding it for far too long. Imani sat composed, the lease still in her hand. She didn't sit with pride or satisfaction, just certainty. Her fingers quivered faintly, but her voice remained steel. That mattered more. Across the room, Celeste Boone leaned back, arms rigidly folded, a fortress of denial crumbling. Her eyes darted toward her attorney, who looked increasingly uneasy. He whispered again, lower this time. She gave him a nod that said, I hear you, but I'm drowning anyway. Judge Norwood scratched his temple with a pen, glancing at the document the bailiff had delivered moments ago. His voice was careful, deliberate. Ms. Boone, he said, is there anything in this document that is inaccurate? Celeste hesitated. No, she finally admitted, but I didn't intend to mislead anyone. I didn't think it would be a problem. I made space for her, with a curtain between the kitchen and the bed. Amini tilted her head, not in anger, but in curiosity. A curtain? She asked softly. Celeste looked away. That was the thing about silence. It didn't always equal guilt, but sometimes it screamed louder than any confession ever could. Judge Norwood cleared his throat, shifting direction. Ms. Jefferson, he said, his voice now softer, you've clearly done your research. You're remarkable. But what about the emotional aspect of this case? Isn't it possible your aunt is simply trying to reconnect with family? Amani nodded. Yes, but reconnection doesn't mean displacement. It means showing up, calling, sending a birthday card even when there's no court hearing coming up. That landed like a stone dropped in still water. Celeste opened her mouth, then closed it. There was no defense. Amani continued, her voice unwavering. People always say blood is thicker than water, but water keeps me alive. I don't need people who just resemble me. I need people who recognize me. That's when Deborah wept. Not soft tears, not silent ones, full, unfiltered emotion. Stan reached over and pulled her close. Roar rose suddenly. Your Honor, he said sharply, this has become an emotional display, not a legal proceeding. The child is articulate, yes, but this is about suitability, not sentiment. Norwood didn't so much as glance his way. He turned to Imani. She met his eyes, calm, unflinching. May I ask one more question, Your Honor? She said. He gave a slow nod. Truth or a lie? She asked. Have you ever had to grow up before you were ready? Judge Norwood didn't respond with words. He blinked, long and heavy, and looked down. The kind of silence that tells you everything. Outside, the late afternoon light angled through the windows, golden and low, stretching across the courtroom like it, too, was reaching for something steady to hold on to. Imani felt the weight of it all, the gazes, the expectations, but she didn't tremble anymore. She just breathed. Judge Norwood leaned forward, the easy tone from earlier replaced by one of deliberate gravity. Miss Jefferson, he said, this court is tasked with ensuring your long-term well-being, emotionally, financially, physically. That means more than who presents the best argument today. I understand, she replied, but I needed today, not to win, but to be heard. Because sometimes the truth gets lost in the paper trail. People forget there's a living soul behind the file name. Celeste rose then, for the first time during the entire proceeding, and turned to Imani. I didn't come sooner because I didn't know how, she said quietly. I wasn't ready to be anyone's guardian. I was still learning how to be my own. Imani gave her a single nod. I know. That's why I'm not angry. I just can't afford to be part of someone else's trial and error. Another pause, heavy and deep. Roar looked like he wanted to intervene but didn't. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't shatter beneath the truth already spoken. Judge Norwood turned to Deborah and Stan. Mr. and Mrs. Greer, would you like to make a statement? Deborah shook her head softly. Stan cleared her throat. We came ready to fight, she said, her voice cracking. But she fought for herself. That says more about her than anything we could ever say about us. That settled in the room like gravity. Norwood looked back to Imani. You've read legal documents before, haven't you? Yes, sir, she replied. Then you know this won't be decided today. I'll review everything. Carefully, the right way. I understand, she said, rising. But now at least, I know you see me. That's all I ever needed. She placed the lease back into her tote bag as though it were just another sheet of paper. But everyone in that room knew it wasn't. It was the moment the tide shifted. She returned to the gallery, her steps quiet but assured. No one would ever see her the same way again. The judge recessed the court, but no one moved. The air had thickened, dense with something unspoken, as if even standing might break something sacred. Imani slid into her seat between Deborah and Stan, suddenly small between them, yet somehow greater than the room itself. You okay, baby? Deborah whispered. Yeah, Imani murmured. Just tired. Stan chuckled gently. You cross-examined 3 adults and dismantled a housing case in 20 minutes. That'd wear anyone out. Imani smiled, faint but real. Do you think the judge will send me away? Deborah opened her mouth, but Stan beat her to it. Nobody's sending you anywhere, not without a fight. And from what I just saw, you fight better than most grown folks I know. Across the aisle, Celeste sat alone. Roar was on the far end, whispering urgently into a phone. Celeste stared at her purse, like it might offer the answers she never found. She stood and crossed the aisle slowly. Imani, she said softly. Deborah stiffened, protective, but Imani looked up. I just want to say something, Celeste continued. Not to change anything, just because I should have said it before. Imani tilted her head, not harsh, just inquisitive. I wasn't ready, Celeste admitted, and I lied. I thought pretending to be stable was better than being honest. But you reminded me truth matters more, even if it's ugly. Imani was quiet. Then she asked the question that cut through every pretense. Why do you want me? Celeste blinked, the question unearthing something real. Because I didn't want my sister's child to think no one in her family cared. That's not the same as wanting me, Imani replied. Celeste nodded slowly. I know. If the court decides you stay with the Greers, I'll respect it, but I'd still like to visit. No court orders. Just when you're ready. Imani studied her, the way she read a document, carefully, slowly, thoroughly. Then she said, Okay, we'll see. Celeste took a step back. Later in the hallway, Imani walked beside her caseworker, Kendra Lawson, glasses always slipping, heart always steady. You did something rare in there, Kendra said quietly. Imani shrugged. I told the truth. Yeah, but you didn't use it as a weapon. You used it like a mirror. You made them all look. That's how it works, right? Imani asked. Kendra nodded, not as a caseworker, but as someone changed. By the time they stepped into the afternoon light, it didn't feel brighter, but it felt real, and real was enough. 2 weeks passed. A plain envelope arrived. No seal, no ceremony, just her name, Imani Jefferson. Inside, clear language, no fluff. The court had granted permanent guardianship to Deborah and Stan Greer. There was no cheering, no confetti, just the quiet truth at the Greers' kitchen table. Imani read the paper twice. "I guess this means I can stop packing my bag every night," she whispered. Deborah reached over and gently brushed her shoulder. "That bag can stay empty, sweetheart. You're home now." Stan raised his orange juice. "To the girl who beat the system with truth and a tote bag." They laughed. Really laughed. Not polite courtroom laughter, but from the belly. Imani's smile was soft, but her voice stayed serious. "Can we still visit Aunt Celeste if she wants to?" "Of course," Deborah said. "You get to decide what that looks like. This isn't a wall. It's just a door you walk through." Imani nodded. She didn't need revenge, or an apology wrapped in regret. She needed consistency, and now she had it. Weeks passed. The tote bag stayed under her bed. The shoebox of bus passes got heavier. One day she handed Judge Norwood a handwritten note at a community event. Through Kendra. It read, "Thank you for not treating me like a loud kid, for hearing me when it counted. I hope more kids get to speak, not just be spoken for. And yes, I really never took that cookie." No signature, just Imani. It wasn't the story of a girl who found a home. It was the story of a girl who recognized one and kept speaking until someone finally listened. And the truth? Kids like Imani are everywhere. In classrooms, courtrooms, shelters, corners no one notices. They see, they know, they feel. When they speak, we owe them more than applause. We owe them our ears. And if you're a kid like Imani, don't wait for permission to tell your truth. Say it, even if your voice trembles, especially then.